Hi, in this video we're going to be taking a deep dive into the performance dashboard to get an idea of all of the information that's available there for you. In order to see the performance dashboard, you want to first log into Blackboard and access a course where you are listed as the instructor. On the left side pop-out menu, you will see your course tools, and underneath course tools there's a menu labeled evaluation. Under evaluation there are four options: course reports, the performance dashboard, the retention center, and the scoring package. So if you'll click the performance dashboard icon, it'll open up a screen very similar to this. Now, I've taken the opportunity to blur out the names of the users in this course in order to protect their privacy, but you'll be able to see all of the information about every user registered within your course. The first four columns of the performance dashboard are very basic columns. They include the last name and first name of the users. The username is usually 24 underscore and the 900 number of the student follows that, and then the role of any user in the course. So if you have another teacher co-enrolled in the class, maybe your team teaching the course, you'll be able to easily identify that person because their role will be listed as instructor instead of student. So every column after role provides a different type of information that could be useful in very specific circumstances. The last course access date will show you the last time the student logged into the course. You can also see this information in the full grade center. The difference between what you're seeing in the full grade center and on the performance dashboard is that the performance dashboard is slightly more detailed. In addition to providing the last date that the student accessed the course, you'll also be able to see the last time that the student accessed the course. This can be incredibly useful if you're helping a student with a tech issue. Maybe the student is logged into the class and they can't see something, or you made an edit to the content that day. This will let you know if the student accessed the course before or after you made that content edit. Next to the last course access date, you'll see the number of days since the student last logged into the course. This is just Blackboard saving you a little bit of time in doing the math. This can be incredibly useful if you are, for example, about to open up a Teams alert and you want to be able to provide as much detail as possible about the student's engagement in the course. So it may be a little bit easier to say, hey, the student hasn't logged into the class for 7 days. If you're concerned about the numbers you're seeing on this particular performance dashboard, please be advised that this is a class that hasn't been taught for at least 2 semesters. So it's no surprise that a student hasn't logged in for 170 days. And you will have access to the performance dashboard data as long as you have access to the course. So if you want to go back in and look at this for any individual student who took your class, a semester ago, just go back to that class and access that class's performance dashboard. The columns following the day since last access are all linked columns, which will provide individual data on the student if you click on the numbers or icons within those particular columns. So let's first take a look at the review status option. The review status option can actually provide two separate sets of information. When you click on review status, the first thing it's going to do is show you everything in your class that is listed as an item for review. So in this particular class, I'm only seeing one item because only one item in the course has been marked as an item for review. If you're not familiar with the review option, it's a great way to hold students accountable for information that you don't necessarily plan on testing them on. So if you go into any item in your course and you access that drop-down menu that's next to the item, it pulls up a gray pop-up menu that allows you to typically edit or make content available, and one of the items under that is to set review status. Once you have set the review status, you'll see enabled review appear underneath the name of the item. And what the student sees is something very similar to this. And so underneath that, 5 things you should never say to your professor, you'll see that there's a link to access the article. The student reads the data. And once the student has finished reading that information, they're going to click that marked reviewed icon, and the phrase mark reviewed will be replaced by reviewed. So if I have something like guidelines where, hey, I want you to know that these are the guidelines for your final project, and I want to make sure I know that you've read them, I might enable the review status just to make sure that you're checking off that you've reviewed these items. So when going back to the performance dashboard, in addition to giving you a list of every item that you have marked as needing review, it will also tell you the review status of any student. So when we look in the last column of this review status, we can see that this student has marked those 5 things you should never say to your professor as reviewed. And so if the student hadn't, it would say something different. And going back to the home screen of the performance dashboard, the next column is the adaptive release. And adaptive release is a slightly more complicated version of the review status. It's typically used when you have a lockstep approach to your class. So for example, if I don't want a student to take a test until I know that they've taken the pre-test, I might put adaptive release settings on the test. Or if I don't want you to start essay 2 until I know that you've looked at your feedback for essay 1, I might use adaptive release to ensure that you've done that first task before you can access the second item. And so again, it's slightly more complicated. We have separate training videos on how to set up adaptive release, but if you are interested in what this adaptive release menu is telling you in the performance dashboard, each of those folder icons is going to provide individual data about the student user. So when you click on it, it's actually going to show you something like this, which looks very much like the navigation panel for your class. Now, this can be a little complicated to read if you don't know what those icons mean, and if you don't fully expand this menu, you're not actually going to see the icon key. It's down at the very bottom of the menu, and it looks something like this. So it's only the 4 icons. And if I go back and I actually look at what this adaptive release setting is telling me, this red icon, or the eyeball with the red slash, is telling me that that content is not visible to the student. And when I look at this, I can see that this person has a clock without a check mark. So that's telling me this student has not marked the click here for a handy guide to navigating this course as reviewed. And because they haven't marked that item as reviewed, they are not able to see any of the things in the task 4 folder. This information might be useful to you if you have a student who's emailing you and saying, hey, I don't see this content in the class. So if you've set up some more complicated adaptive release settings, it's a quick way to go back and say, have you clicked what you were supposed to in order to release the next set of content? The folder, or excuse me, the column after adaptive release is a discussion board column. And again, it provides individual data on the discussion boards. So one of the useful things about this is that it will show you all of the postings for all of the discussion boards by user. So if I click on any user within that table, it's going to pull up something like this. And this is showing me that this class has 3 discussion boards within it, and the student made 1 posting on the first discussion board and then 3 postings each on the second and third discussion board. If you actually click on the name or excuse me, on the title of the discussion forum, it will pull up the student's individual postings so that you can read through them all at the same time. It also tells you the date that the discussion board postings were made, and it gives you some metrics to measure the student's performance against the average of what the class did. So it'll tell you the minimum and maximum post lengths as well as the average length of a posting on the discussion board. So if you're kind of trying to look at a student's overall performance on your discussion boards, or maybe you're trying to provide them feedback based on 1 or 2 discussion boards before they do, discussion boards 3 and 4, this is a really good way to kind of see their overall performance. It's also really convenient because when you're looking at this discussion board feedback, you have the option to email the student simply from the performance dashboard. So if you click that email user icon, it's giving you a very quick way to email the student based on what you're seeing in their discussion board performance dashboard settings. So the next column is the retention center column. And I want to take a moment before we delve into what this is telling you to talk about the differences between the retention center and the dashboard. And the performance dashboard. The performance dashboard is really giving us a kind of overall view of how users are performing in the class. It's not telling me who's in danger of failing the class. It's not designed for me to be able to specifically monitor any individuals. It's just saying, here's what's happening. Here's when people are logging in. Here's what they're reading. Here's what their discussion board settings look like. The retention center does provide more information, and it is specifically designed to assess the risky behaviors of your students. So are students in danger of failing the class based on what they're doing? The retention center also allows you to specifically monitor student performance in a way that the dashboard, the performance dashboard, does not. So you'll notice under this customized retention center that it's showing you a fractional representation based on quarter. So it's saying, 2 out of 4 behaviors are 3 out of 4 behaviors. We offer separate and more in-depth training on the retention center, and I certainly hope you'll take an opportunity to look at that training. But just as an overview, there are 4 basic behaviors that the retention center is monitoring. It's looking at access. So when was the last time the student logged in? And again, you sort of get some of that information in the performance dashboard. It's looking at activity. Is the student just logging in, or are they logging in and completing work? It's looking at missed deadlines. So is the student completing work on time? And then it has a grade alert function. And the grade alert function is looking at the student's performance based in comparison to the class average. So when I'm looking at this the performance dashboard, what it's telling me is that several of these students are demonstrating 2 out of 4 dangerous behaviors, and that there are other students who are demonstrating 3 out of 4 behaviors. And so when you click on those students' custom retention center settings on the performance dashboard, what it's going to do is automatically take you to the individual retention status of the student. And so as I'm looking at the information that this is displaying for me about this particular student, I can see that this student has 3 out of 4 dangerous behaviors. So this student missed a deadline. The student has a grade that is 25% below the class average, and the student hasn't logged on in 5 days or more. This is the kind of information that the retention center gives you a more in-depth view of. And again, I hope you really take advantage of the training that we offer on the retention center, because it can save you a lot of time and energy in trying to monitor and help students. And so if I want to look at a student's performance in comparison to other students' performances based on the retention center, the performance dashboard does a really good job of making it easy to kind of look at all of the students' retention center triggers at one time. But again, if I want to know more about that individual specific student, I want to click on the retention center to read through that information. The final option underneath the performance dashboard is actually a view grades option. And of all of the columns, this might be the least useful column, because it doesn't matter which student icon you click on. All of those are going to route you back to the full grade center. So that's not going to provide any individual information about the student. You can run individual grade reports on students from the Full Grade Center, but clicking this icon is not going to take you automatically to that information. It's just going to route you back to the Full Grade Center so that you can access the menus to do those things. And again, we offer additional training on the Full Grade Center and how to access those grade reports. So please feel free to check out the training on that. So when we look at what the performance dashboard is doing, it's really a great way of getting an overview of what's happening in your class to see when students are accessing things, if they're actually reading through the review statuses you've set up, if they're triggering the adaptive releases. It's a great way to look at their overall discussion board feedback and to see how at risk they are in comparison to other students through a very general look at the retention center. I certainly hope that this information has been useful to you. We welcome your questions or comments. Feel free to reach out to us by emailing distanceed@augustatech.edu. We also would really appreciate your feedback via survey. It's a very quick survey. It's 4 questions long. You can access it by either typing shorturl.at/lmtwz, or you can see a link to this survey in the description of this video. Thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to supporting you through your future distance education courses.